Graham is going to, as I mentioned, going to be joined by 1111. We're pretty excited to have 1111 here on November 11th. I've been geeking out about that a little bit. But they're going to spend the next little bit talking about how to build a smarter and more agile network for the cloud era. So please remember to drop your questions in the chat, and we'll ask them at the end when we have live Q&A. So Graham and Mac, take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen. Good morning, and really excited to have Mac here. As Jen mentioned, Chandler, if you want to go to the next slide there. As Jen mentioned, today is Veterans Day here in the United States, and in Canada, it is Remembrance Day. So Veterans Day, of course, a day where we give thanks to all of our veterans. So for all of you on the call who served, I saw my man WD, Marty, and Dave both put up their times on there. So gentlemen, thank you so much. For those of you who have friends and family that have served, thank you. We appreciate your service. In Canada, today is Remembrance Day, and I know we've got some Canadians on the call here. Remembrance Day in Canada is very similar to Memorial Day here in the US. And if you watch any hockey games or anything like that on TV or see Canadian politicians, they all have a red poppy that they wear on Remembrance Day, and that is a tribute to World War I veterans based on a poem called Flanders Fields, which I'd recommend you check out. A really beautiful poem. We learned that in elementary school, but so important to give thanks for all who served, and then in Canada, those who passed while serving. So thank you so much. So as Jen mentioned, could not let the opportunity go by to have 1111 on the call with us today during the 11th day of November. And usually I pick a topic and then kind of go and find a supplier to work with me on it. But as it turned out, this really worked out well because 1111 is doing a lot of cool things that we don't necessarily think for them about. And I'm going to bring Mac in here in a few minutes to talk through that. But before we do that, let's kind of just go through what I'm talking about here. So Chandler, if you want to move on to the next slide. As you guys have heard me talk about in the past, the way we look at connectivity has changed. So the way our customers are consuming connectivity, the way they're buying connectivity, and the way they're using connectivity has changed over the last few years. And as a result of that, we've got suppliers in the portfolio that are changing as well, including 1111. So Chandler, if you want to move to the next slide. The network is and has been the business backbone. So this is the one thing that's clear. I know a lot of our TAs here on the call and within the Telarus community sell a lot of bandwidth, and that is no surprise because bandwidth growth has been 40% since 2000. So regardless of whatever technological revolution we have, technological change, bandwidth has grown by about 40% over that term, and doubling, bandwidth demands doubling almost every 2.5 years. So regardless of what other technologies you want to focus on, what other technologies you want to sell, bandwidth and the network is the key and is the backbone to all of it. And I think those trends are playing out. As we've starting to evolve into more of a sort of an edge economy, 90% of data is being created on the edge. And that's been a real change for our customers out there as they are starting to change the way they consume network and how those networks must support their businesses. So one of the things you always hear us talking about is we don't just sell products, we solve problems. So today I wanted to take a look at some of the problems that our customers face when they're looking at our network and looking at it through their eyes. We're going to focus on a few key problems that customers tell us they have and how we can solve those problems. So remembering, of course, customers don't just want circuits, they want solutions. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide there, Chandler. Customers don't want circuits, they want solutions. So what does that mean, right? They want a solution to their problem. They're buying those services to accomplish something. And the gap between what networks deliver and what businesses need has been getting wider and wider. And a lot of our suppliers are starting to evolve to meet that need, right? Back in the day, we had a lot of complexity. We had a lot of things going on, MPLS networks, all these kinds of things were complex. You needed network engineers on your staff to kind of make sense of everything that was going on. Nowadays, customers want simplicity and agility. So modern networks, the kind of networks that we're starting to see and starting to sell, are evolving to meet that need. So let's go ahead and dive into some of these customer problems. Chandler, next slide. Problem number one, my network can't keep up. And when we think about this, we think about speed, right? But the first problem is when customers talk about speed, they're not talking about performance on a dial with an Ookla speed test. They're talking about business speed. Can my network do the things I need it to do in a timely fashion, right? So they're not buying necessarily bandwidth, faster's better, whatever. They're talking about, can my network solve my problems? Can my network do what I need it to do? Many networks are stuck in the past, and we tend to focus on things like speed on an Ookla dial or whatever. Hey, you've got 1,000 megs up and 1,000 megs down. You should be fine. But reality is what's going on within the network and what is it trying to accomplish? So we need to make sure that we are looking at it from that standpoint, from the customer standpoint. Speed doesn't necessarily mean more bandwidth. It means being able to accomplish their goals as a business. So let's move on to the next slide. Problem two. I can't see what's happening. This is something that we hear a lot. Visibility control, and it's very tough to manage what you can't see. Today's networks, a lot of organizations are flying blind. They don't know what's happening. IT leaders say that they still juggle 5 or more dashboards to figure out performance issues. Cisco, according to Cisco, 90% rank end-to-end visibility as their number one priority. So that's a pretty significant change, 90%. In addition, 67% of IT leaders are telling us that they have significant gaps in their understanding of their network performance and network issues. And then this one here really jumps out at me. 45% only discover problems after users complain, not through proactive monitoring. And of course, that is not the way that we want to function when we look at things. We all want to be able to anticipate problems and resolve them before they become a big issue. Most companies are in reactive mode, so pretty significant. Let's move on to the next problem here. This is one we're hearing a lot more of, depending on who you talk to. Somewhere around 80% of CIOs are trying to reduce their amount of vendors, meaning they want to buy more stuff from a single provider, not have multiple providers all over. The average enterprise, as this says, works with between 7 and 10 network and connectivity providers. Each has their own portal, each has their own billing, SLA, support process. That's a lot to keep on top of. And of course, when something happens, we get into this salute, right? Whose fault is it? We're going to point the finger at somebody else. So 76% of CIOs are actively planning vendor consolidation to reduce complexity. And this one's important. Improve accountability, meaning I want to be able to know who to go to talk about when I have a challenge, right? I don't want to have to figure it out on my end and go, hey, where's the problem happening? So organizations are looking for partners that can simplify their vendor landscape while continuing to meet them where they need to be met with capabilities in the business. All right, next problem. I need financial flexibility, not fixed circuits. If you take a look at everything else in the technology ecosystem, cloud, cyber, CX, all of these things are moving to a lot of consumption-based models where you can buy based on what you consume. Network and connectivity has been slow to get there, but we're starting to see that a lot more with things like NAS, network as a service, and all these different solutions. The network carriers are finally starting to evolve to meet the needs of their client. Today's CFO wants what the CIO already has in the cloud. Pay for what you use, right? They want to be able to know if I use it, I'll pay for it. And the good news here, moving to this consumption model is actually good for us as advisors, as we'll show you here in just a few short minutes. Next slide here, problem number 5. My apps, my data, and my users are everywhere, right? This was really exacerbated during the COVID era, when the pandemic, when we sent everybody home. But it had been evolving in this direction for a long time, where you're going to have a remote or a dispersed workforce. Now, we know this story very well. We helped a lot of our customers through this during the digital transformation, when we moved a lot of them from on-prem voice systems to cloud voice systems. Well, we're starting to have to do the same thing with network now. Things like SASE and SD-WAN, cloud-based services, are becoming a bigger and bigger deal. And 80% of enterprises are looking at adopting SASE or some kind of SASE element by the end of next year. One of the first slides I showed, it said 90% of data is now being created outside data centers and organizations. That means I need my network to be able to bring that data from the edge to me where I can do something with it, right? So there's a lot going on. The question for companies isn't whether to modernize, it's how we can transform our network to match this new distributed reality. Okay, so where do your customers feel the pain? It's probably one of these issues, right? These are the 5 problems that we covered. These problems are not theoretical. These are the daily reality for our IT leaders. And when we think in terms of how our customers are thinking, the problems that they are facing within our network, it becomes much easier for us to have a conversation and bring value to them as a tech advisor. Again, this is where we come into play, is we solve problems. Nobody wants to buy what you're selling. They want solutions to the problems they're having. So, all right, well, let's go ahead and open it up now. I'm going to be joined by my good friend, Mac McClenathan, easy for me to say. And Mac, welcome to the call. I kind of just threw a lot of stuff out there,
Yes,
but
you did.
I think clearly you guys are one of these companies that has evolved the way you guys are supporting network and network services. And not a lot of customers think about 1111 for network. So talk a little bit about what you just heard me say. You agree, you disagree, where you want to poke some holes in it. And then let's transition a little bit and talk about how 1111 is delivering some network services.
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree, and you're right. I think that not a lot of organizations or not a lot of partners at this point really know what 1111 is on the connectivity side, and it's largely because we spent the last several years, like 40, in the cloud space. But we've actually been kind of working this problem. You mentioned how solution providers are kind of evolving to meet the need of the day and make cloud connectivity a little bit more not only consumption based, but keep that design in mind. I mean, the whole network expansion for 1111 was really fueled, and I would even say in some cases funded by Amazon's need or AWS's need for more visibility on the last mile, because cloud providers have we all have the exact same problem. If your network or connectivity is subpar, then your cloud experience is likely to suffer. So through a partnership over the last several years, we've kind of not only grown our own points of presence, but built out leveraging their backbone and created our own points of presence and backbone to provide monitoring and access for them to get visibility on the last mile services, so they're not in a finger pointing game. So customers have the exact same problem, right? If they can't see what we kind of sought in the creation of the new, or I guess modern 1111, was combining the cloud and connectivity and security stories all into one dashboard. You mentioned, the average looking at 5. What we're trying to bring is, here's a platform where you've got not only my virtual infrastructure running your applications, your data, but also network statistics, visibility, so you know where to troubleshoot and how to remediate sooner rather than later, but all in one console instead of the 5 that you mentioned before. So observability is a big element to that for sure.
Yeah, and Mac, you talk obviously 1111 with your sort of cloud background, right? You talk about a lot of this in the context of cloud, and I think that's super critical. But it's also important to realize that this same principle expands to things like AI, CX, all of these
Mm-hmm.
other services that the network is supporting. It's the same challenges that you have with cloud. So we can look at kind of cloud here as a microcosm, and you guys have done some really great things with this, which we're going to hear about in a minute. But understanding that this expands out into all areas of the organization.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, think about this too. When you talked about financial flexibility, think about customers wanting to consolidate vendors, but what's the benefit in that? Obviously, single point of contact, maybe. Those are tricky problems to solve as far as support, and cloud and network are different support structures. But think about it in the context of an agreement. So if they've got an MSA and they're looking for flexibility in agreement, if I've got to turn down a location, I can now move money around beyond just the network connections, I can move them into storage and compute and managed services. You can move stuff around a little bit more than you might otherwise looking at ETFs on circuits where you've got a evolving environments that's expanding and contracting.
Yeah, love it. So Mac, why don't you take us through a couple of the cool things and the unique things that 1111's been doing in the network space? Introduce the folks here to, obviously thinking about you guys in those contexts and how you guys have been making changes to meet the needs of the customers.
Sure. If you want to throw up that slide, are we there yet?
Yep, you got it. Your network offering right here. Connectivity.
Oh, maybe. Oh, another tab. Didn't see that one. Yeah. So, I mean, this is traditional. Here's what's on the truck, right? So these are the circuit types we've all been selling for years and years and years. The access methods. What I would say, these aren't new to 1111. They've technically been on the truck. The issue that we had prior to, and I guess what is new, is now we're newly competitive nationally. So in pockets, we had a few pops in the Northeast. Everywhere else wasn't super competitive. And that's really the problem that we've sought to solve over the last several years before we launched it to this community at large, is the ability to compete, but also deliver some of these next gen services and capabilities. If you want to hit to the next slide. I will hit on your comment about speed, though technically I like your thought about speed and agility, but bandwidth volume has been pretty wild, with this year being my first time getting multiple requests for stacked up 400 gig circuits. So that is a real thing, but you could probably fill this out. There you go. But like I mentioned before, we've kind of been working this model a little backwards, data center out to the edge. Again, until we had the access agreements, where 4 years ago we had a handful, now we've got several hundred. So the ability to compete across the country and even the globe now is a reality, and we're starting to definitely win a lot more opportunities within Telarus just based off of pure aggregation. But oftentimes how we're getting into those opportunities, well, I would say historically, if we're having a conversation about infrastructure or DR, you always have to have a conversation about access. How do you want to access that environment? Immediately, you get into the edge appliance that they prefer, right? What are you running on-prem? What SD-WAN solution? What routing appliance do you prefer? And oftentimes, maybe they say, hey, it's a Fortinet. Okay, awesome. I can spin up a virtual Fortinet in my environment, either production or DR, to give you access and merge that into your overall SD-WAN solution. In all likelihood, they probably didn't have that set up. So it led to more opportunities for the edge and then the connectivity. That's what we've been doing for the last 4 years. What's changed, I would say, from early or late 2024 with the competitive nature, we went from maybe 7% of the selling population with the partner community to like 85 or 90%, because now we can lead with network. And when it says like cloud first sales culture here, we can now pull those cloud deals through networking opportunities, because our guys historically have always focused on the cloud first. And it's a great partnership for the networking partners out there that have a lot of experience in that space. They're identifying, they already have an existing funnel within the connectivity world. We are finding those opportunities at a greater rate than I thought. It honestly sounded a little markety to me when the concept arose. But then you start to see the deals happening and it's like, oh, this is interesting. And then the customer buy-in. We won an opportunity last month with Telarus that I think was about 83,000 that started with network or connectivity aggregation. There was a private element to it where we did some VPLS for their main locations. They wanted to run their own Palo Alto SD-WAN solution. So we put NIDs out there for monitoring. And the story that they really bought into was already after that first network connectivity deal, there's colo opportunity on the table. There's a 20K infrastructure deal on the table. So it is materializing in real life. It's not just a marketing punchline. The other element, though, too, that I found interesting, I mean, we would really position ourselves as a technology company. So connectivity is a part of that, but how you access these applications, how to modernize, oftentimes you do need to dig into the weeds a little bit more than just, okay, let me replace what you have today, and do a deep dive, audit of existing devices, look at utilization, actually look at the architecture, make recommendations, provide the inventory diagrams, and really chart out what that modernization path looks like. Because again, depending on the size of the environment, this can take a good amount of time and effort and project, and everybody's got to know what's in store. So before we put that remediation plan in place, digging into real advisory services, again, for the larger, more M&A focused organizations has provided a good amount of value. And I mentioned on-net services before. Again, aggregation in the purest form is just reselling and consolidating on a bill. What we're talking about is not just that, right? So that's an element, but having our own points of presence in cities across the country and even the world, now we have the ability not to just resell somebody else's port for the billing aggregation benefit or a single point of contract for support benefit, but actually delivering our own IP, one, to make us more competitive, but also make us more flexible in how we deliver things like direct connect or express routes, and blending that onto one physical connection. We can give you now DIA, AWS Direct Connect, Azure Express routes, all on that one facility, and even deliver that out of multiple points of presence to give you resilience across the board. Again, without having to buy 6 circuits to achieve what we can do on one. That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, the key thing here, again, just to echo what we've been talking through, is that it's no longer just a one size fits all type approach, right? Each customer is going to go, and whether you come from the cloud, take a look at what's going on. Hey, what are we consuming in the cloud? What's going on? Let's have our network meet those needs, or you've got the network first to start with. There has to be some kind of conversation, some kind of investigation into really what the customer needs in place from their network, right? Nobody just buys network just to buy it. It's supporting something. So what is it supporting? What is it in place to do? And that's really where we need to start the conversation.
Right. And the ability to meet the customer where they are, right?
Yeah.
Contracts have all plagued this world. So again, kind of working our old model, but it's available now to everybody. But being able to just sell monitoring, if I can provide observability to a customer where they're not going to go stand up their own instance of Logic Monitor and hire a knock and do all that, it's the same story we've all been telling about security, about building out your own SOC. Are you really going to do that internally? If I could provide observability on an existing environment, that's kind of phase one. We could take on third-party circuit management to give them a buffer, again, single point of contact, but not pay any ETFs, and then we can source those circuits as we go. So there's a lot of flexibility in how we can kind of modularly put this together, which again is helping us win opportunities more often than not. And I think that I don't know if this is a trend that you're seeing, Graeme, but we've been doing a lot more takeover management of existing environments, thinking like they have existing Fortinets, they have existing Meraki's, they've got Viptela. They just don't want to manage it anymore. So being able to layer the management onto an existing customer-owned appliance, and then again, work that process backwards, allows for a lower barrier to entry, and an opportunity to expand.
Yeah, and you said something that I think I want to just highlight again. This idea that the contract is a limiting factor. Customers they're just not going with that anymore, right? Like they're looking for a true partnership. They're looking for somebody that, hey, I can work with as my needs change, and that partner will evolve with me, not limit me because of a contract that I signed for a circuit 3 years ago, right? I think
Right.
that's really the change in the mindset that customers have, is I no longer accept that as a limiting factor for what I'm doing here.
100%.
Yeah.
Well, and talking about contracts, and this is somewhat nichey. So I'm not trying to oversell this, but there are some unique benefits in the enterprise with AWS specifically, because we have such a tight partnership with them, and we literally have the ability to extend out from their backbone network to the customer prem. So think of the old way of, hey, I'm going to go buy a direct connect. I've got to find my way to an on-ramp facility. So buy a point to point, take up some networking gear, then work out. So it's like three, the hands in the pie trying to make this thing happen, and it just was kind of kludgy. With the model that we're running with them, we're literally taking the on-ramp and pushing it to the customer prem. So simpler access for sure, but what that also brought us was the ability to procure through the AWS marketplace. So if an organization, and again, just for quantification here, that's probably a company spending $1 million a year in AWS. I thought that was going to be more nichey than it was. There's actually quite a bit more of those than I was expecting, but they all would find the procurement of network connectivity through the marketplace very interesting. One, it streamlines the order process dramatically because it's already an approved vendor, if you will, But it also goes against their spend commit. So if they've got a commitment to AWS, if y'all aren't familiar, it's not like you've got a monthly commitment to a product set. It is, here's a giant pool of commitment. You can use any of our services over a period of time, and you have to get to this number eventually. Well, the network spend, and I'm saying everything, not just Direct Connect, DIA, SD-WAN, monitoring, management, all that stuff can be bundled and pushed through the marketplace that can make an enormous impact on helping customers bring down or negotiate better discounts with commits with AWS.
Yeah, and I think that's just to kind of piggyback on what Wes said there about SMBs, like, more the medium size of the MBs, but that's a big problem for them a lot of times is that commit. They've got some assets in AWS and they're concerned about, hey, I've committed to this spend and I need to find some other stuff. I'm not going to consume it all in cloud. So I think that there's an opportunity there for your sort of maybe larger small business and medium business. Enterprise, they probably aren't as concerned about it. They're going to meet that need, but really when you get into that mid-market, medium type business, that can be a real challenge.
Yeah, 1 to 20 million a year in AWS is probably the target for that concept with the for spend commit burn down. The other one though, with procurement, think about this in the context of like the SLED space. If you need a buying contract, to transact with a state and local government, AWS is on a lot of those. So that kind of checks that box kind of behind the scenes where you can pull the networking through the AWS marketplace because it's already an approved vendor.
Yeah, I mean, that's a tremendous point there for sure. We often get roadblocked into some of those accounts,
Yeah.
right? So cool. Let's go ahead and move on. We've got some discovery questions we've got here. And Mac, these are ones that you guys have had some success with as you've been, having conversations with end user customers out there in the marketplace. Why don't you kind of talk through some of these, what kind of doors these questions open, and then we'll open
Yeah,
it
sure.
up to a general Q&A.
Yeah, again, I think these are more themes of conversations more than like, hey, go work this list and check the boxes.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, what we're looking for, again, it's not the old, give me an inventory, let's see if we can save you money, let's build out resiliency. What we're trying to figure out is how is connectivity impacting your applications? What feels slow, which is, I know, an ambiguous term, but again, we're looking for monitoring, assessment business. Obviously, how do we provide a more direct path to public cloud potentially? That's what we're kind of digging into there. Carrier diversity. I mean, this is where most of the conversations start. Building out some level of resistance. So if we don't have I like to say, I mean, we don't have to do everything to do anything. So oftentimes, especially as, not someone that is historically known as a connectivity provider, we oftentimes start as a secondary. So, hey, I need resilience at these locations. Can you deliver here and be competitive and potentially help me manage, the failover? Building out and kind of playing that secondary role is oftentimes the first step in, how are we reaching? I mean, this is actually how to turn cloud deals into network deals and network deals into cloud deals. But how are you accessing these environments? That edge device is hugely important in determining what's next. And you can kind of work it into the data center or out of the data center. And then day two ops, again, no IT team is saying, I have so many people, I don't know what to do with them. Like the trends, the tedious tasks of management on the network. We see it a lot in the data protection side too, like who wants to manage backups, who wants to manage all these rule changes in the next gen firewalls, who handles that stuff, who owns it, is a really telling answer oftentimes. And the willingness of these organizations to give over to a managed service provider is so much higher now than it has been really in my last 15 years. But and obviously looking at circuit timelines. But my bonus question down here again is just kind of I would say underscore, $1 million to 20 million a year, 25 million a year in AWS spend. They probably care about network burning down spend commits. It's not usually enough as a standalone to get them to upend their network. But if there's an active network project, like they're actually evaluating or adding something, maybe it's just, hey, I need a point to point from here to here. It's a good starting point to just say, do you carry a spend commit? And are you on track to hitting it? And really what that tells us is, hey, do you know we've got a strategic provider that actually can pull your network connectivity through the marketplace and burn down commit? Would that be interesting? Again, don't kill yourself, spending a bunch of time winning and losing those deals, but it can fast track a deal that might not have otherwise gone our way.
Yeah. Yeah, a couple of these points, obviously that 2-day ops thing, Josh Lopresto always talks about poor Timmy and IT, right? Like just overwhelmed. And we're asking more and more and more of these IT guys, and there's just not enough time in the day. That first point, though, I think is the one that really kind of brings this full circle. Which apps feel slow? Meaning, which business outcomes am I not getting, right? Like I've got these things that I've bought or I've put in place to accomplish something, and those things aren't delivering what I want them to deliver, right? That's really where a lot of this conversation starts. Is you've purchased apps or whatever it is to deliver a business outcome, and there's challenges meeting that outcome. So great conversation starters here to get going. Let's go ahead and bring Jen back in. Jen, you knew where I was going with that. You were on camera right away.
I did. I was waiting.
Yeah, very active chat session here. So let's see what we can get to. And Mac, you're coming here and join some of this with us as well. Let's see if we can handle some of these questions. We might have lost Mac here. Oh, there he is.
I think he's here. He just turned off his camera. There we go. Hi, Mac.
I thought I was getting ready to get the boot, but I can definitely take some of these
Max,
questions.
Do not leave. We have a couple questions for you. I actually, Graeme and Mac, thank you very much for that presentation. I thought that slide that you had, Graeme, at the end of your opening presentation with the 5 pain point areas would be a super helpful discovery slide for folks to have, because it would allow for customers to point to the places where they're actually experiencing pain. So in that thing, Mac, where you said, hey, what feels slow? One of those pain points was speed and all that kind of stuff. It would be a great door opener. So we're going to make these slides available through Telarus University. And Mac, if you're open, we can include your slides in there too, because there have been a bunch of questions. Okay, fantastic. So let me ask you a couple of these questions. When you drop site or circuit services and add another location, is it coterminous with the existing contract dates, or does it extend the contract term to add a new location?
It's negotiable.
Okay.
So there's not a single answer to that. It kind of just depends on the initial terms of the contract and then what we're trying to achieve long term. So if we've got a customer that wants to dig in and be more strategic and roadmap and plan, there's a lot more flexibility in the agreement. As it's written, it would just be pay ETF, add a new one. But there's a lot of contract flexibility if we're having conversations about future growth expansion.
Okay. There was also a question in here about, do you guys have your own network?
Yeah, so that was the one I was trying to type, but obviously that one, yes, we do have our own backbone. You probably kind of picked up on this, but this is definitely a new concept, and we are the only one positioned this way. But largely, our network backbone is AWS's backbone. So if you think about that from size, scope, globally, they probably have one of the top 3 global backbone networks in the world. They own and run their own fiber environments. They connect each availability zone with 4 separate routes in. So if you think of fiber cut, the Red Sea fiber cut, both of them in the last 6 months, they were unaffected by that. So what we're actually bringing to market is AWS's backbone. We also have some other elements that were built out adjacent, but with access to that, it's a new resilient route that this community has never had access to sell before. So if you think of even national, but even global, we're taking a different path. And as other connectivity providers continue to consolidate, this conversation will actually probably get a little bit more interest in the business community, because it speaks directly to resilience and diversity of paths.
Okay, I think I've got one more question for you. That was just you gave us a lot of great discovery questions and ways that people could open conversation. If a Bluebird came to you, which is ironic because I'm about to talk about Bluebird, the supplier next, but if a Bluebird deal came your way and it was exactly the right business problem presented on a plate for you that would allow a land and expand into your portfolio of offerings, what would that look like? What kinds of questions or problems should people be listening for to start in the right use case for expansion deals?
That's super broad, but I will tell you that where we're seeing most of the activity and a lot of value add right now is M&A. So high growth organizations that continue to acquire that use case I gave you earlier, 83 grand. I mean, that started with I've got all these companies. I have no standard as far as like edge environments. How do I blend this environment, standardize across all these new acquisitions, ingest them faster? So we're adding that layer of support to the networking team. Even if they, in this case, they want to run their own edge appliance, we're still managing all the network growth and monitoring on their behalf as they expand through acquisition. So speeding up consolidation, helping with consulting services, all of those things are great fits for big strategic deals.
Great, thanks. Graeme, do you have any more questions for Mac?
No, I think just a great session. And again, I just want to encourage everybody out there to start looking at this a little bit differently. That point about the contract that we talked about earlier, I think that to me is really indicative of the change here, is that organizations are refusing to be limited by a contract term or whatever with their network. They want that to be agile. They want the ability to make changes. And we're starting to see the enterprise organizations really lean in hard with these type of services. And we know from experience that that's eventually going to start to trickle down to our small, medium, mid-market businesses as well. So just, the type of thing that we want to keep an eye on, focusing on those business outcomes and making sure that our network services can support them.
Can I put a punchline on that one real quick?
Yeah, please.
Because this is the best time in the world to have this multi-service contract conversation with all the external pressures. So think you got like 2 to 5% colo availability in the United States. You've got all the Broadcom madness where organizations are trying to figure out, do I optimize? Do I exit? There's change happening everywhere. So the ability to shift, spend, and move it around to different technology pillars is allowing us to play in deals that we may not have otherwise played in. So
Love it. Love it.